Yo, what's going on, E7 fam? I'm Sue, and in this one, I want to talk about the upcoming World Arena Improvements notice that was just posted yesterday over on Stove. Yes, I know I am a day late with this video, but I have a very good reason for it. In case you guys missed it, I made a community post detailing the other day about a family member of mine who is very sick. Over the next few months or so, I'm probably going to miss a couple of videos or streams here or there. I might be late on certain things like the Tori voice acting part 4, right? Because this family member, currently, they deserve my full attention, and I want to do everything in my power to help them overcome this ordeal. So hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying, what I'm implying here, and I thank you so much for your patience and your understanding going forward. Anyways, the topic at hand today. They announced a bunch of changes to World Arena, and I kind of want to weigh in on my thoughts on some of the things that were actually discussed. So as you can see here, it says that they will be sharing their details of the upcoming World Arena improvements and their direction, which will be introduced in the preseason that begins on April 5th. So that means, along with this announcement over here from the website formerly known as Twitter, that the season probably ends on April 5th. So that's like 2.5 weeks. And as you can see, tomorrow, March 19th, they will show us this one on the left, which if you can't tell by the large top shelf here, this is obviously the Sylvan Sage Vivian skin. Unfortunately, Vivian is not very good in the current meta, but we welcome a new skin for Vivian. Hopefully, it's like blows our socks off. I want it to be the best looking skin in the game, honestly, because Sylvan Sage Vivian kind of had a grave injustice done to her. She was kind of done dirty. So in case you don't know, when Sylvan Sage Vivian first came out, Smilegate was kind of embroiled with a controversy with the Korean GRAC over the release of Arya. Arya was considered, I guess, too lewd, so they were trying to censor Arya, increase E7's age rating, and so Smilegate kind of panicked and made it so that the curvier female characters were much more subdued, much more covered up, and they massively censored or changed proportions of the character, right? If you don't believe me, you could just go look at Sylvan Sage Vivian in the game. You could see that her legs are like disproportionate to the rest of her body. They kind of really messed with the live 2D. It's very jarring once you see where like her legs connect to her hips, for example. It's very, very jarring. So hopefully there's an anatomically correct, good skin that we can talk about. And as always, I will do an RTA cheat sheet for those of you guys who are looking to get masters. I will have a video for you guys probably in the next couple of days, since we are approaching the last like 2 weeks or so, just like I did with Flan, just like I did with Sermia. So if you want to see that, make sure you get subscribed to the video, right? Ring the bell for notifications, and you will see it as soon as it goes live. And then on the right here is very clearly Tamarin. Miracle Maid Kingdom is coming back along with Laya and Sweet Miracle. So very clearly, as predicted, since Tamarin wasn't there last year, probably due to the fact that Awakened Potential got canceled and they just didn't have the manpower to finish events the way that they wanted to, we'll finally be getting that. The question becomes, is it a skin or is it actually a unit? Me personally, I was hoping it would be a unit, but the fact that the quote is, "I'm so nervous," which is something that she says when she's not in idle mode when it's her turn, right? Makes me believe that this is just a legendary skin, which is it kind of sucks, but here we are. Anyways, let's talk about Battle Frenzy changes, right? So Battle Frenzy is something I've always really liked about Epic 7, because they can't nerf things due to the promise that they made back in 2019, or at least that's what they've been told. I still think that they can nerf things, right? They just need to not care about, you know, a very vocal minority in the community. But regardless, Battle Frenzy was their way of being like, we can adjust the balance of the game by applying like filters to the RTA experience. So, oh, Soul Weavers aren't good. Here's speed for Soul Weavers. Oh, look, so all of a sudden Soul Weavers are very good. Mages are not doing super good this season. Here's some changes to help out mages. And then like, for the last like year and a half, they just did nothing with it. The last Battle Frenzy change is actually this one here. When a covenant hero is attacked by an element, they are resistant against damage received, and any additional damage caused by the attack decreases by 30%. This Battle Frenzy that they're removing has basically been the Battle Frenzy for the last like year and a half. I have people like Jas in my Discord who have been playing Epic 7 for less time than this Battle Frenzy effect has been in effect. They've been playing for like a year and change. This Battle Frenzy has persisted that long. Like, we basically almost had third pick ban protection for like a year at this point. And it's very, very frustrating, right? It feels like they just threw in the towel. And there's no semblance of like trying to care about balance in the game anymore. I mean, if you play RTA, you play PvP, you probably already know this, right? Carcetti, Newman Luna, right? Sea Phantom Politis, Bloodblade Corinne. These characters are all just like super massively overtuned. And you'll get like a buff to Veronica or something. And it's just like, all right, yeah, that's enough. And then they just let you go about your way, right? So they haven't like really meaningfully tried to do anything with Battle Frenzy for a very long time, right? And you can see here, it says the original purpose of this effect was to further emphasize elemental advantages and enhance element-based strategy. So their intent was to make RGBs better. However, with the Battle Frenzy effect persisting for an extended period, we found that this mechanic has instead become a restriction for Covenant heroes. That's very, very true. That's exactly how I feel about it. The game, when it was first, they first basically gave us PvP, right? When it first started to really heat up and they introduced Mystic Summons, they basically let us know, hey guys, Moonlight heroes are the main heroes in PvP. They are designed to be the best heroes in PvP. RGBs might have a place, but they're not normally going to be the best things, right? And then what ended up happening is that the game felt super pay to win, or pay to win, my apologies, because you would just go all ML5s, right? Every team just 5 ML5s versus 5 ML5s. So they needed to do something to make RGBs good, right? And this was kind of the solution. And instead what happens is like your opponent picks a non-attack skill. You pick green Celine because it's the very clearly obvious thing that is good into it. And then they pick red Robbie. And then red Robbie might not be good against your whole team. But if it comes down to just Celine versus Robbie, you have no hope of winning. Because you just can't deal any damage to them. Even though Celine just does an astronomical amount of damage with her S1 and S3. So yeah, that's just kind of how it is. It's always felt really bad. And I think it makes people not want to play RGBs even more, right? They're more inclined to want to play pretty much just Moonlight heroes. And if they're not going to play them, they just play the really overpowered, limited RGBs, right? And I think we need to move away from that. It's a whole topic for another video, but essentially, it's just too hard to get into RTA right now. You need too many limiteds, too many collabs, too many MLs. They need to kind of alleviate that somehow, right? So they're saying this is to make an environment where a wider variety of Covenant heroes can thrive in World Arena. We'll see. Next, the attack and defense of heroes will be increased. I think this is actually mostly a good thing. I think defense of heroes 1000% should be increased. Attack, I'm not so sure, right? So the reason why I feel like defense of heroes should be increased is because fundamentally, defense is just kind of broken right now. In the game, when the game first came out back in 2018, defense and defense buff were higher than what they are now, and defense break was designed based around those higher numbers. They, at some point, nerfed Elson, Tieria, and Ricarus, and alongside of it, they brought defense buff down, they scaled it down, made defense worse. So now, if, unlike attack buff, right, if I have attack buff and attack down, right, it's not really... like it's either break even or like the attack comes out slightly ahead. If I have defense buff and defense break, I still have my defense reduced because defense break is just worth more than, you know, defense buff right now. And I've always felt like, hey, they really should have lined those up so that they're equal, but they never have. And the reason for this is because defense break is so pivotal in PvE content that hunt teams, Abyss strategies, they just stop working if you nerf defense buff at this point in the game's history. So I've always felt that Battle Frenzy should make it so that defense break is not as good as it would be in PvE to address this, but they never have. The alternative solution that me and a friend of mine proposed was that they should just add defense to artifacts, which will help shore up the survivability of certain heroes, especially tanks, right? Like that would be a very good thing, and it doesn't take much, right? You can basically be like, for the very offense-oriented artifacts like Ancient Book, for example, it can give 0 defense, but like Arius can give like 200 defense or something like that, right? That would help a lot because just damage is so high right now. And if you look here, it says in the current meta, attacker heroes who rely heavily on their base stats without sort of special survival effects seem to be at a disadvantage. That is true. That has always been true. It's been true for 5 years, Smilegate. It's kind of shocking that we put out a notice that says, we noticed that the things that don't have survival passives aren't very good. It's always been that way. Like, Alencia is like the only character I can think of in like the last like 5 years that had a pretty decent successful run as a DPS that didn't have built-in health on hit, built-in stealth somehow, immortality, invincibility, cockroach passive. Yeah, the list goes on, right? Innate dodge chance, right? All of that stuff is what makes good DPS good. It's one of the reasons why like Blue Luna is never going to be like super amazingly meta, because while she does have some survivability, is very inconsistent and not very strong compared to traditionally strong things like your stealths, your immortalities, things like that, right? The things that we associate with the meta DPS of today. So it's, again, it's just jarring that they're like, they made this statement and it's like, hey, it's always been that way. Like, so kind of you to notice what the player base has for the last 5 years. To address this, we are increasing the overall defense of heroes to improve the survivability of attacker heroes. This also feels just terrible, right? And it's not because I don't think that characters like that are attacker heroes, like your Wukongs, your Lunas, shouldn't have defense, right? Extra defense. That's fine. Afternoon Soak, Flan, and BBK also get the same defense, though. So if the goal is to make it so that a character like Luna survives longer, like BBK still survives the same amount longer, you didn't really move the needle, right? Like, it's like if I give, you know, like, if like Luna needs financial assistance and I give her $100, but I also give $100 to BBK, who's already filthy rich, like, it's like, we didn't do anything here, right? Like, you're moving both sliders the same degree. So I don't really get this. I think that saying this is kind of wild to me. If anything, I think I welcome a defense increase because it helps tanks. And I know people are always like, oh, I want to get out of this tank meta. And I'm here to tell you from everything that I've seen that aside from Albedo, tanks suck in the current state of the game. They're not good. If you show a tank in the first 2 picks of World Arena, I think you just die in the current format. Like, you just die. Aggro teams are so good, they're so strong, that they can just run you over. Like, Albedo feels like she's the only unconditionally good tank, and you've got to be on protection set with, like, immunity, really, to make max value out of that. The other tanks that are playable are like Raz, who's not really played for his tank ability. He's played largely for his S2. Last Rider Crow for his ability versus specific AoE comps. And then you have like Crimson Armin and Crow. And like Crimson Armin is almost never played, right? It's very, very rarely played. It's played like versus like Cleave. And that's about it. Whereas like most tanks would work there anyway. And then Crow has a 50.00% win rate in the current format, which is not really good. It's not bad, but it's certainly not, like, amazing. Basically, the state of tanking in Epic 7 in World Arena, at least to me, feels like Albedo. It's just, did you play during Overlord? Do you have Albedo? If you have Albedo, you can play tank. And even then, it's not always the best because your opponent could just death break you turn 1 on Albedo, and then just run you over. Like, you basically, to play a tank, you kind of are just locked into protection set immunity on, like, all of your tanks. You have to. Or you're just going to get run over. Like, it's very, like, your build paths are very limited on tanks, I feel like, at the moment. So, at the same time, attack will be increased to ensure that tanker heroes do not become excessively difficult to beat. I hate that they call them tanker. Just call them tanks. To ensure that just say tank heroes do not become excessively difficult to defeat, right? Again, it's probably my personal bias, right? Because I like the turn 2 playstyle, but I think tanks are not good this season. I don't even play turn 2 this season. I cleave this season. I play cleave. In case you guys are wondering, in the comment section, somebody inevitably always will say, oh, but Sue, you're just a turn 2 player who's complaining because you can't win. No, I'm currently sitting outside of Emperor with a 70% win rate, playing almost exclusively cleave and aggro. I don't even play turn 2 because I think it's bad. I legitimately think it's bad. I don't even have top speed, and I still have to play top speed strategies. Anyways, moving on. Lastly, the damage dealt by burn, bleed, and bomb will be increased. Outside of few exceptions, heroes that rely on debuffs for their attacks is an important distinction, because debuffers are broken at the moment, in my opinion, right? Hellion Lua is snapped. Newman Luna is completely snapped. Death Dealer Ray, completely snapped. Like, absolutely back-breaking characters that should just be removed from the game, right? Those characters are just way too damn strong. But for characters that rely on debuffs to deal damage, they do in fact struggle in the current meta. It's basically Pirate Flan, and that's largely just because of her S2 CR push as a bridge. The rest of her kit is whatever. You're playing her for her passive. You're not really playing her for her S1 or her S3, right? That's not the reason you play the character. We believe these heroes are not receiving enough reward for the risks they take. To address this would be increasing the damage of burn, bleed, and bomb, allowing heroes that specialize in the effects to make a stronger impact. Alright, here's my problem with this. Yes, they do not receive enough reward for the risks they take. Like, a carrot does not receive enough reward for the risks that that character takes. The reason is because bleed and burn as mechanics are trash. And there's only really, like, 3 bomb units, right? And one of them is trash. That being Leo. Maybe Sid. I haven't played with Sid. Maybe Sid is a bomb unit. Point is, there's like 4 bomb units, and like half of them suck. Right? It's just Flan and Asaria. And I think if you increase the bomb damage, maybe those characters see a slight uptick in play. But the core problem comes in the fact that bleed, burn, and bomb are all basically the same debuff, just varying degrees of good / bad, I should say. So bleed deals damage over time to a target based on the person who inflicted bleed, their attack score, right? And it takes time to deal the damage, which means that it can be cleansed. That's counterplay. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with a Montmorency cleansing my bleed. There should be inherent counterplay in all things. My problem with characters like your Lunas, like your Hellion Luas, right, like your Death Dealer is there's not meaningful counterplay outside of like 1 or 2 things in the format. So I'm okay with that. But the problem is then you look at burn. Burn has the same exact attack scaling as bleed, but it ignores a portion of the person who is burned, their defense. So burn is just strictly better than bleed in like nearly every single scenario. The only time bleed is better than burn is if you're in a PvE fight and it specifically requires the bleed debuff, or it requires a different named debuff than burn. Like, for example, one of the Abyss floors requires you to have like 5 different debuffs, so you could have burn and bleed. But other than that, there's never a time where burn is not strictly better than bleed. And then there's bomb. Bomb is the exact same thing as burn, but it stuns. So bomb is just strictly better than burn, and burn is just strictly better than bleed. If you want to make bleed characters good or burn characters good, you should make burn and bleed do something different than bomb. Bomb should be attack-based damage, ignoring a portion of defense that stuns. And then burn can be attack, ignoring defense, and it gives unhealable, or whatever. And then maybe bleed is like deals damage over time, but, I don't know, gives attack down, right? Or gives speed down, or something. I would say injury, but that's Venom, right? I would personally, bleed should have been Venom all along, right? So the point is, these 3 debuffs, the reason they don't see play is not because they don't do enough damage, it's because the debuffs honestly just suck, right? Let's like be honest here. Bomb is the only one of here that's like actually good, and it's just not attached to characters that are particularly very, very strong, right? They are niche characters. If they weren't niche, right, like they had more applications, they were things like that, maybe we would get there. But burn and bleed, I think, is like a lost cause. I think you should just rework these debuffs. That's just my 2 cents. Anyways, let's move on now and talk about the new Warlord League added. So this is going to be for players that are between rank 1001 and 3000. And honestly, this is a really good change, right? If you played World Arena long enough, you kind of get a feel for like where there are different divides in player like rankings, player skills, like the difficulty of the matches that you're going to be playing. Like bronze and silver are markedly different than when you play against gold and master players, right? And then challenger players are markedly different than playing against, again, the gold and the master players. And then you get into champion, which is where you start to have like veteran players who've been playing for a while that have very robust rosters with actual built units on like good gear, right? And the vast majority of the active World Arena player base falls in champion. Most people, like the active people, the people that are grinding week after week, they're going to be in champion most of the time. And if you've been playing in champion, you've ever been in champion, there is a marked difference between getting to champion, the 2200 plus mark, versus the people that are in the top 2000 of champion, right? Champion might have like 6,000 players in it total. The 1,000 best players in champion are significantly harder to beat than the rest of the players in champion, which is basically where Warlord is, right? 1,001 to 2,000 is significantly harder for you to beat than everyone else in champion. It's like, I call it the wall, like the wall between Emperor, right? There's a wall of people that are all good enough to touch Emperor, but maybe not finish it, and they are all way stronger than the rest of champion. So this is a huge change to me. I like this a lot. But that divider that I'm talking about, that also exists even within Emperor, right? Rank 101 to 300 in Emperor is significantly stronger than everybody in 301 to 1000 from my experience playing. And even then, like, when I've been in, like, the top 300, right? Those seasons where I've actually pushed that far and sat there for a while, I'll run into legends, right? If I run into, like, a legend player that's, like, 70, rank 80, right? It's not that much different than playing against the Emperor players that are in the 300 to 101 range. But if I run into like an Elf Mage or a Light, right? Or any of these other like top 20 legend players, right? Like maybe like I'm failing to like blanking on names here, right? But like maybe like a Jinte from back in the day, right? There is a marked difference between how strong those players are versus the bottom of legend finishers, right? So there's at every tier there is a divide. You will, as you approach the next tier, there's a huge gap. But champion by far had the biggest gap, right? Because you would go from 2,200 points to like 3,400 points, and all those people would still be champion. So at least now the people around like 3,400 points, they're Warlord players. So we have like a classification, right? And they can get recognized for how good they actually are, because it feels really bad. I know, because I did this in the first couple of seasons where I had no interest of getting legend, I would literally park myself at like 2,200. If that was the champ cutoff, I wouldn't go like a single point beyond it, right? And then there would be people who would grind like a YDCB who would finish like rank 101 or 102, and he would get the exact same thing as me who played like 15 games the whole season, and that feels awful. You should at least be recognized for your effort, for how much effort you put in, and I think this is a good change overall. All right, the last thing to talk about here is the lunatic draft update, right? The new Lunatic draft mode featuring a revamped pick ban system is scheduled to be introduced during the preseason, and obviously this image is a mock-up, right? In Lunatic Draft, the 10 heroes used in the previous round will be placed under Lunatic ban in the next round, making them unavailable, while pre-bans will accumulate as usual. Lunatic bans reset each round, making strategic round management crucial. So from my understanding, this is both players enter a best-of-3 set. You each pre-ban 2. You play a match. All 10 from that match are banned, so that would be 14. And then, because it says while pre-bans will accumulate as usual, that leads me to believe if it's like round mode, you each get to strike one more character each. So that means by the time you make it to game 3 of a set, you each have 4 pre-bans, so it's 8 total characters plus 10 banned from the last one. That is 18 characters banned from the final game. And honestly, I don't really like this system that much, right? Yeah, it says here, with a significantly expanded ban list coming compared to the existing round mode, this mode emphasizes the use of personal Joker picks. So basically, your tech picks, your secret characters, the ones that you keep hidden. Like, oh, I've got like like an injury Judge Kisei or whatever in the wings or whatever you have. Like, that's what it's supposed to try to emphasize, to gain an edge. This mode is planned to be used at E7 WC 2025, but will be introduced in the preseason and will be immediately available to play in mock battles after the update. I will probably test this with my regulars, maybe even on stream, but my gut feeling of how this was going to work out is that it will be fun for people to watch in the E7 WC, like us as a viewer. That, like, you know, I'm not gonna try to play in the E7 WC, right? I'm gonna try to watch it, right? I'll enjoy watching Worlds every single year. For us, this will be fun because we'll get to see like dumb stuff that you probably wouldn't get to see otherwise, right? Like in the past, we've had like, oh look, he's on Proof of Valor tank ran, right? You'll get to see like weird stuff, but as a player, it feels like kind of bad, right? Especially if you're not like a legend level player, right? Somebody who is going for Worlds, it's gonna feel really bad. To use my example of Jas from earlier, who's only been playing for like about a year, right? He's missing most of the ML5s and most of the limiteds, and his roster of RTA characters is like maybe 20 something characters. So for him, after like game 1, his roster is just like in shambles. He can't really even play games 2 or 3. He just doesn't have a large enough pool to make that happen. And I feel like the vast majority of players who don't have every single character or close to every single character in the game aren't going to have a big enough roster for you to actually meaningfully engage in the lunatic band style, right? And then on top of that, right, even if you do have the roster, do you have enough gear to reasonably have like 70 units geared, right? Because the thing that's going to happen is when you have 18-ish pre-bans going into that game 3, the meta shifts very drastically. So certain things like that might not be very good, like for example, like Blue Teiyu might become a very valuable pick because Celine and Politis are just off the board at that point, and you still need a way to punish non-attack skills. So it's just like, who has enough resources to be like, I have 2 Politises and Green Celine and Teiyu and all the meta relevant openers, and then also, oh, by the way, you know, I'm a tank down player, you know, he pre-banned 2 of my tanks, the other one's locked under lunatic mode or something like that. Do I have like a 4th string tank that's like actually reasonably geared that can play at a high level? And for most people, the answer to that is going to be no, I feel like. I think that it's a good idea to make it more exciting for the spectator, and that is fine. There's something to be said about that, right? Not every change needs to be gameplay focused. If it makes for a better, more exciting game, then fine. But honestly, I would rather they do the hard work, you know, even if it makes people mad, and do things like nerfs or make sweeping balance changes, right? And they kind of address this. We'll talk about this in a second, like down at the bottom, that there are other changes coming, and we will see them during the preseason. So maybe they are planning to make big sweeping changes. But for me, this seems, it's so much easier to like hire, you know, little Timmy across the office and be like, can you make a mock-up for like this 10 ban list lunatic ban thing, and then just ship it? That's like our tweak for balance to make E7 WC exciting, rather than like make it so that Harsetti, an 85% pick ban rate, gets adjusted, the highest in the game's history, to make sure that characters like your Empyrean Illinabs, your Lunas, your Hellion Luas, right, that they don't just completely, or Afternoon Soak Flan, BBK, right, like there's a ton of them. Like, these characters are just design mistakes. I'd like to see them get addressed in some meaningful way, rather than just say, we can sweep it all under the rug with lunatic ban. So I'm not a fan of this, right? It'll make for really exciting streams to watch, like it'll make for a pretty cool watch party, but I don't envy people playing E7 WC that have to play through this nonsense. I don't think it's particularly very good. Fan pick UI improvements. Finally, you'll be able to see your stats, artifacts, sets, all that stuff, so I don't have to be like, which Bellion is my prot set one and which one is my damage one. In the past, I just go, okay, RTA skin Bellion, that's the 3F one. No skin Bellion, that's the Aureus one, right? And people kind of know that too. Like when they see like, oh, it's a no skin Bellion or whatever, right? It's probably like, oh, that's probably, you know, not a damage one. Like that's his alt one. So I like being able to be able to see my stuff when I'm inside of the game. Like this should honestly have been there forever now, right? And I've seen online the comments like, oh, there's a blue Lilibet here, a blue Kaware. Look at this Mercedes art. And it's just like, guys, this is all placeholder stuff. Like, you can tell that they are highlighting Maya, but it's showing Commander Pommel. Like, what are we talking about here? Right? Also, he's on the Lovers, which is never going to happen. Nobody is playing Rage Speed, by the way. They're not playing Rage Speed on the Lovers. It's like just not possible. Right? 625 speed also. 6 stats, by the way. 60% dual attack chance. Yo, can I have this Pommel? He only has 377 HP, but he's 625 speed with 20k attack, and he's got a 60% dual attack chance. Surely this is the opener that we need. Anyways, so to wrap up here, right? It says here, this concludes the information of the preseason improvements and updates. Please note that these features are still undergoing development and testing, so they may be subject to change upon release. We appreciate your understanding. I'm always good to see that there in the end, just because, you know, if they have to change something, they let you know ahead of time, so don't be mad. Don't complain about it. In addition to the updates mentioned, we are preparing further improvements targeting the summer season and upcoming preseason. Additional details will be shared in future notices. We're always monitoring your valuable feedback on the battle meta and balance, so we will continue to explore various ways to enhance the World Arena experience. So as I said, this is here their way of saying there might be more changes to come. And honestly, I welcome it, as you guys will see when I make my cheat sheet for Vivian in a couple of days. This is a really like lopsided meta, I feel like. Just speed is very, very strong right now. At least from what I've watched from people in my Discord, watching other top players play, and then my own experiences playing right now in the actual format. The game is very opener centric. It is very aggressive. The person who gets the foothold and puts their foot on the gas usually is the person that ends up winning, unless you kind of have like a very smart tail end pivot into a tank down strategy, right? Again, we'll talk more about that in a couple of days. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on all of these changes to World Arena down in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? As always, I want to hear your thoughts. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, rest of your week, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later now.